Good afternoon, everyone. This is Joe DeZino from the NIJ National Center on Forensics. And today we're providing training, advanced crime scene training from two very experienced crime scene folks. There'll be two presenters. Our first presenter is Domingo Villarreal. He's currently at the U.S. Department of Justice International Criminal Investigative Training and Assistance Program, better known as ICITAP. Prior to that, he was a director of crime scene for Houston Forensic Science Center. He's been a retired police officer for 23 years and current president of International Association of Identification. Our second presenter will be David Doglietto. He's the senior forensic specialist with the Greenfield Police Department in California. He's also an adjunct faculty member at Hartnell College in California and chair of the Crime Scene Certification Board for IAI. So very experienced crime scene folks presenting to you today. I hope you enjoy it, and I'll turn it over to Domingo. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everyone. First of all, we're very excited to be part of this. When they asked us to do the advanced crime scene analysis, it is a pleasure to talk about crime scene. It is obviously our passion. One thing that we must always remember, crime scene analysis, crime scene processing, the crime scene itself, it's the backbone of any investigation. So what I'm trying to say, if we don't do the work right at the crime scene, then nothing else is going to come out right. So it is very, very important that even though at this point you've already taken basic, intermediate, and these are more of the advanced information for the analysis, it is always to keep in mind the importance of the integrity, even though basic and fundamentals must be followed, because again, if it doesn't happen at the crime scene, the subsequent labs will never have anything to work with. So very important to start, as we can see, with the number one, preparation and training. Every scene is going to be different, and that's the beauty of it. What we love about crime scene is that there are never two scenes that are the same, ever. So even though you may have some expectations, you will never have the scene worked out in your mind before you get there. So every time you get to a scene, just like it says rarely the scene is what you are prepared for. So the great suggestion here, it's always better to bring more equipment that you might need than have to be able to look for it when you're there. It is very important, obviously, to get all the information if anyone is at the scene. So this is one of the techniques, and going to the crime scene is trying to get all the facts, trying to find out as much information before we even get there. This is a way also of finding out what type of equipment we're going to need to process the major scenes. Along with all that, we need to also make it a practice to keep all of our equipment clean and well maintained, the batteries charged, the cameras functioning, just the basics that we don't think about until we're at the crime scene and we need them. So we need to make sure that everything is ready for that moment, because then there's going to be no time. It's always important to have the stocks available of all the items we're going to need, whether it may be lifting tape, whether it may be fingerprint cards, whatever the item that it's going to be. But most importantly, those batteries on those cameras, because a camera is the most important piece of equipment that a crime scene investigator person is going to need. We need to document. A great suggestion is a checklist. In agencies where I have worked, those are worked wonderfully, because we're not robots. We're humans and we forget. So to have a checklist of perhaps the inventory, of perhaps the conditions of batteries, it's always a wonderful thing to have. And along with that, just like this, the training, you must be trained. Yesterday, we received the latest copy, and we'll share it with you. The NIJ just printed and sent out the latest publication of the crime scene investigations. So my partner, Doglietto, will share it with you when he comes up, and you can have access to it. It's already on their website. So once you have the equipment ready to go to the scene, then we're at the scene. The most important thing is to control that scene. Okay, we always want to make sure, and this is, I know it's basic, but it becomes major. For example, an officer-involved shootings or major scenes, you will have the big commanders there. You will have the media. You will have supervisors. You will have a lot of people that, because of the rank, they might be authorized to be, but not inside the scene. So this is where it becomes important to control the crowd. And we're not talking about the public. We're talking again about our coworkers, about those that feel they need to go in there and see what happened. So it becomes very important to take not only control, but to secure the scene. Remember, the main two things most important at a scene is to prevent contamination and destruction of any evidence. And as we know, we can't see what happens when it's being done either way. So we must control, we must have a way, a system to make sure that they wait until the scene in itself is processed. Many agencies that are now getting accredited of their units, they follow these very stringent procedures, and as we did in the agencies that I've been with. So it is very important that everyone understands. And this perhaps is not a conversation to have at the scene. It is recommended to talk to these executives, to the chiefs, to the sheriffs, to the big rank people prior to, have a meeting and explain to them when a major scene happens, when one of the officers gets shot, when someone gets, majorly injured or something happens, that the control of the scene itself, it's going to continue. You're going to have to really set these parameters because it's extremely important that nothing gets destroyed, that nothing gets damaged or contaminated. And it is our job. When we go to the stand, it doesn't matter whether it was a chief or the sheriff, it's going to be on us if we allowed someone to go in there. One of the easiest policies on that is only people that work the scene should be allowed inside the scene. Once the scene is processed, once the evidence is secured and collected, then we can have a walkthrough by the whoever executives that want to come into the scene if needed. But again, I would always say, I will show you every picture that you want to see, but there is no need for you to go in there. Very important to work as a team. Okay. Very extremely important to communicate. One of the assignments that I've had in my previous positions was exactly that. Just to be the liaison, just to be the intermediate person that will control anyone from interrupting my CSIs. My CSIs need to do their work. They know what they needed to do. And my job was to keep everybody else away from them. That includes the media, again, the big executives, the sheriffs, the corporals, the sergeants, all those high-ranked position people. They like to be treated with respect, and everybody does. But again, these are meetings and arrangements that need to be set prior to, because at the major scene, there's going to be already lots of emotions and feelings, and people may overreact. So again, try to have a system, something set up prior to, before making this contact with them at a scene. I will go ahead and give my partner now an opportunity to come in, and he can continue and make some points of what I've made. Thank you.
Thank you, Domingo. Well, yes, certainly. I tell my students that forensics is the future, and it has been for the last 120 years or so. But most people, I assume just about everybody, expects a certain amount of fairness when it comes to our courtroom procedures. And that's why we have due process in this country. And forensics is the way to guarantee that fairness, especially when it's presented in an unbiased manner. So Domingo is absolutely correct that if we, as the crime scene folks, and in fact, it's more than that. It's your administration of your police departments, your sheriff's departments, your law enforcement agencies, that there should be a well-trained crime scene team that's available, and that's their role is to process crime scenes and to ensure that evidence is properly collected and preserved for courtroom purposes. So everything that we're talking about here is what ensures that that ability to have that evidence to speak at trial. And I'm sure Domingo can agree with me that 20 years ago, we never thought you could get DNA off of a fired shell casing. So we really didn't put a lot of effort into preventing contamination when we collected them. These days, of course, you know, it's quite possible to get DNA from a fired cartridge casing that's in the scene. And so that's why we have to make sure that our policies and our procedures are concurrent and up to date and at the best industry standards. So for the Greenville Police Department, we have a protocol where when we're handling shell casings from a crime scene, that it's full protection, face mask, arms, gloves, and we limit the actual contact with the shell casing itself. We use sterilized tweezers and put it into a sterile envelope and place that in a jewelry box, and then make sure that there's no contact with us until it gets to the lab. So it's most important to have protocols, but it's also most important to have a step-by-step plan, a methodology that you're going to be able to use when you are first in that scene and making your decisions of what you're going to do. So, of course, one of the most important things is to identify and preserve perishable or fleeting evidence as quickly as possible, because that can be completely lost while you're still trying to get your equipment set up in a staging area. So you want to do your initial observation and assessments of the scene, looking for that evidence, footwear evidence, impression evidence, anything that can be destroyed if you're not careful, which is another reason to get everybody out of the scene as quickly as possible. And then to have that plan in place, figure out who's going to do what. And I always say that, you know, a well-composed crime scene team may have 5 or 6 people. But if you don't have 5 or 6 people to commit to that scene, you only have 1 or 2. Well, guess what? 5 or 6 roles still need to be done. They just have to be done by 1 or 2 people. Ideally, it should be more, but so it's not so much designating which team member is going to do what. It's more of a matter of making sure that all of the jobs get done. Again, protocols are extremely important, and it's very important to make sure that your protocols are being followed. So every agency should have policies and procedures in place for any aspect of the forensic disciplines. Now, of course, if you're not being observant when you make that first observation and assessment of the scene, then we may have a problem where we're overlooking valuable items of evidence, or sometimes even it's the lack of evidence. Sometimes you get in there and you say something's not here, something that should be here is not here, or you're looking at bloodstain patterns where there's a void where something has interfered with the distribution of that blood. So I always love the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's quote in Sherlock Holmes, "I see no more than you, but I've trained myself to notice what I see." And so it's very important for whoever's doing that initial observation to not only pay attention to the scene itself, but also if you've got other people that are assisting you in that assessment and that observation, listen to what they're saying. Don't ignore them. We work as a team, and we work in a manner in which everything is done precisely and diligently, and of course with the greatest of effort. So I always say, if you're crime scene, be proud of being crime scene. Be CSI proud. Domingo, you want to take it from there?
Yes, sir. All right, and very important, just like David has said, CSI proud. At the end of the day, everything that we're doing at the crime scene, it's going to be for testimony day. Okay. One of the things that I've always also shared in my trainings is that you should be working a crime scene, imagining that the jurors are with you. And that's a way that it also helped me in the 30 years plus that I've been working crime scenes, the major ones especially. I would always imagine, what would a juror ask or wonder of me doing this, or me selecting not to do this at a crime scene? So you should always keep that in mind, because at the end of the day, it will be at the court when you're sitting on that stand and that defense attorney comes up and asks, can you explain why you did this? Can you identify, can you tell us the procedure? Can you give us your results? Or the prosecutor trying to bring something in for you to explain in front of a jurors. Because at the end of the day, one of the phrases that I love using whenever we go testify in court, again, of all our work, of this proud CSI that I am, it's showtime. And that is a mental programming state that I had to learn very early in my career, because at the end, it's showtime. And that's why I love crime scene, because what we do in crime scene, it's everything to do with what we saw, what we did, and we're just relating our results. So we don't go on any hearsay. We don't care if the person that was identified as having the impression on the gun says that he wasn't there. We don't care. Our job is just to explain about that item, the documentation showing about that item at the scene, and our work on developing, perhaps in that example, this print. So it is very easy to explain our work. And that's why I loved crime scene, because as the common line, just the facts. We will not listen to the hearsay. That's for the investigators. That's for the prosecution to try to prove why that person's print was on the weapon. But our job will always be limited to what we did, what we saw, and what we documented from that scene. So showtime should be also a reminder that we should have the right attitude. And just like my partner David said, when we do the work, we must do it to the best of our capabilities. And that's why the training becomes very, very important. We only have one opportunity. Once we release that scene, we're done. We're done. So while it is the backbone, as I started explaining, it is also extremely important to know everything that needs to get done. So we need to do a mental reconstruction of everything we're saying. What's in place? What's out of place? What is the scene telling us? What is the representation? Because obviously, a knife that you would think, oh, knife is always evidence, as we know, working many, many, many scenes, is that it all depends on the exact position and where that knife is, whether that knife has anything to do with the scene or not. So there are some items that's why we can't go with a checklist on what evidence to look for. Every scene is going to be different. Therefore, every scene is going to dictate that you not only document, but that you process and that you collect those items in the best manner so that we don't contaminate, so that we don't destroy any potential evidence. As David mentioned, now that we have DNA evidence from touch evidence. So it's very, very important to get that mindset that we are to do a mental reconstruction of what we're seeing once we are at a scene. And it is important then to get as much information to help us. What we may think might have been ransacked, maybe that's the way that family lives. And that happened to me in several scenes. That's why I give that example. So again, identifying what has taken place is the most important to allow us to do that reconstruction and before we do that documentation to process that scene fully. Because once we release it, that is it. On the processing of the scene itself, we have got to do it fully. Remember, you may not get another chance to come back. So it is very, very important that everything that we do once we leave that scene has been done. And it is common, especially on major scenes, that you may get a relief team to come and relieve you or to come to assist you. We're not robots. We get tired. And in some of our areas, it's very hot, very humid. And after hours and hours and hours, fatigue will just be that enthusiasm, all that energy that we have. So this is also another consideration and something to also keep in mind. We may be up in the open area. So do we have any tarps, any pop-up tents that we can hide from? Are we dehydrating so that we can go ahead and hydrate ourselves? So we have got to keep all these factors that could affect our work in order for us to still produce. Because when we go to give our testimony, being tired, being hot, all of those factors that are human will not come in play. We are expected to do the best job we can do. We are expected to do the full work that we are required to do. And therefore, any conditions, whether it's heat, whether it's rain, whether it's humidity, whether it's long hours, we have got to find a way to still be able to work the best results that we can do for that scene. The collection of evidence is very important as well. And I will touch on it, and I'm sure that my partner David here will give some examples of his own. But the transportation, the packaging of essential items of evidence is extremely important. Once again, if these items are needing to be processed, are needing to be submitted to the respective labs for further examination, whether it might be for biological evidence, whether it might be for fingerprints, whether it might be for ballistics, whatever lab function that it is, or whether it is for us to then be able to process for latent print or friction-rich skin detail development, then there's still very important ways not only to handle the item, but to package the item and transport the item. So all these factors are very, very important. And there are training, obviously, there are procedures that we can learn on how to best then handle all of these important items so that they can get to their final destination. David?
Yes, and speaking of training, I mean, it's also very important that training is also for the other members of law enforcement who might be in your scene. we've all had a patrol officer find a gun in a traffic stop and then book it into evidence, and you get a note saying, can you process this for DNA and fingerprints? And of course, being curious as I am, I'll look at the booking room video and I'll see he's not wearing gloves. He's not wearing any, he's manipulating the weapon. It's like, are you sure you want me to do that? Training has to be extended to all members of law enforcement who are at any time going to be handling evidence. But on the point of training, I always say that it has to be constant. It has to be contemporary. Training must always be challenging, and it has to be a career-long activity. You have to make a commitment to training. A lot of us, we get as much training as we can early in our career, and then we kind of let everybody else go to the training, and we end up being teachers. Well, we forget that teachers need to be well-trained as well. So training has to be extended to everybody, no matter how far into your career you are. You must go to training. And that includes reading trade journals or magazines that are on the topic, or the publication of the IAI, the JFI. That's an excellent periodical that I devour each copy that I get, the Journal of Forensic Identification. So we must keep that in mind, that training must be priority. And unfortunately, in this day and age where law enforcement budgets may be cut, sadly, one of the first things that gets tossed out is training. And we can understand that because you need to have bodies on the street, but training is, equally valuable, and we cannot just say, okay, we'll push training off until next year or the year after when things are better. It's vital to the function of the agency. It's vital to the use of that forensic evidence in court, and so it must not be overlooked. And on the topic of being prepared for your crime scenes, we have things at our convenience for being able to locate that hidden evidence, that evidence that you might not be able to see. But how often do we actually take a chemoluminescent blood reagent to a scene, or leucocrystal violet, or have an IR imaging system with us, or a forensic light for that matter? And how often, if we have them, do we actually employ them? It's up to us in processing that crime scene to utilize everything that we have at our disposal, and to have that with us. I always say, how many of us have a magnifying glass? Certainly as I age, I need a magnifying glass more than I ever wished I had to have one. But how many of us actually take that magnifying glass into the scene with us and look for that evidence that is hard to see by the human eye? So it's very important for all of us to not be complacent, to over-prepare, to have as much available to us as possible when we are at the scene, because it's very inconvenient to have to send somebody back to the station to get equipment that you've left behind. And adding to that is that we have to be diligent in our duties as crime scene folks, and take that extra step. If you think there's something there that might need to be enhanced, to be visualized, take the time to do it. Gone are the days when you can go out to a crime scene, take a few photographs, pick up the shell casings and say, okay, we're back in service. So everything is essential. As Domingo said, you've only got one chance to get it right in a crime scene. You cannot walk away and say, okay, I think we've done enough, without actually briefing everybody that's there, talking to the detectives, talking to the crime scene team, throwing out ideas. Should we do this? Did we do that? You know, and listening to what the team has to say, because you'll always get it afterwards when you're driving home and you say, did we do this or did we not do that? And so the time for that thought is not when you're driving home. The time for that is before you put all the equipment back in the van or the truck. So yeah, be diligent in what you do. And like I said, I know crime scene folks. I've been dealing with crime scene folks in the certification process, and I can say without doubt that crime scene folks are very proud of what they do, and I'm proud of them as well. There you go.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. Okay, and just like you said about the training, yeah, the training is without a doubt ongoing, and we must stay abreast of the latest. One of the things that I will also love to bring up at this point, it's the certification program. So throughout the years, the courts now acknowledge and they actually expect that the training is not only taking place, but that training has gone to the next step, which is acquiring a certification. To get certified on the different disciplines is actually the way that most of the courts are now going, and also some of the units that are getting accredited. So it is also at the end, when, remember I mentioned going to court, presenting your case. That's what each crime scene consists of. That final moment when you finally get to present and go to showtime to show them what great job you have done and everything that you were able to do in that crime scene. But it is also the best feeling when the prosecutor acknowledges your certification with the International Association for Identification, which is the only association that certifies in crime scene. So it is very important to acquire these certifications. And obviously they all have different requirements. The most important is that you're doing the work. They have different, we don't call them levels anymore, but different experience allows you to apply for the different certifications. So the requirement is also to stay abreast, and that training has got to have been taken within the last 5 years. We realize that there is so much training, there is so much going on constantly, but is it the updated training on the subject matter? So the training that even the Crime Scene Certification Board, for example, acknowledges is training that has to do with the processing of crime scenes, because that is really the training that we all constantly need. And whether we're a dinosaur like David and I from the old days, we have, even us, we're never a finished product, never, ever, ever. So we're constantly having, as he mentioned, even the JFI, the Journal of Identification and Forensics of the II, that we must always just be reading up on. There are young generations right now that are doing a lot of research on a lot of the work that we've been doing for many years. And it's a pleasure to see that interest, but more than anything, the passion. Like anything else that you decide to do, I always say, make sure you identify what you really like, what you really love, because at the end, If you're not doing what really gives you that passion to do that work, you're not going to do the best work you can do. But once you do, there will be no one else like you because you do it for that passion. You do it not for the money. You do it not for the glory. At the end of the day, you're doing it because it's that self-satisfaction, that showtime. I want to show what I did because I know I did the best job that I could have done and better than anybody else could have imagined. And without finding that true love, that true passion, that passion that really, really drives you, you're going to have to keep looking. So the beauty in crime scene is that it could be photography. It could be the full investigation of making that reconstruction, which is mine. I always say that crime scene is my first love. Whether it's maybe the development of the friction-rich detail, maybe it's the comparison for identification of a person. Maybe it's the shoe wear and tire wear marks comparisons that really, really give you that passion. Maybe it's forensic photography, the digital photography, video. And these are all certifications that, again, the II, the International Association for Identification offers, to also extend to 10 print card operators, to also do the bloodstain patterns, which is also another very passionate field that those that truly love to do the reconstructions really get into. So once again, I wish you the best of luck. You must look for what really interests you, what really gets you going. And the question is, would you be willing to do that job if they didn't pay you? So that's how we know that we don't do it for the money. And those are my closing remarks. I want to thank you very much, and I'll pass it on to David.
Well, yes, I'm a big proponent of certification, and the International Association for Identification has been very good to me, and it's allowed me the ability to reach out to crime scene folks around the world, and we are very well represented, and I would very much like to see anybody who is in crime scene, even if they're just curious about certification, to go into the iai.org, and you'll see that there are drop-down boxes for webpage links to all of the represented forensic disciplines. It's not just crime scene. I will say in closing that sometimes it seems like your crime scene team or your forensic team is not given the accolade that they should by the administration of the agencies, or it may sometimes feel like it's a thankless job. You do a lot of work, especially those reports that can be dozens of pages long, and if you are a chief or a sheriff or an administrator, just every once in a while, tell your crime scene team that you appreciate them, and that let them know that they're a valuable asset to your agency. Sadly, your CSI teams, they do tend to get overlooked, or and it's just remember, you've got a good group of people there that need to every once in a while be told that they're doing a great job. So other than that, I think we've made a good case for training, for preparedness, and for being diligent in your duties. I always tell my students, I really don't care what you find yourself doing in life as a career, so long as you enjoy it and that you are the best you can possibly be at that choice. And so I extend that to everybody that's watching this webinar.
So Domingo and David, thank you so much for your time and effort to prepare and make this presentation for the NIJ National Center on Forensics. Your experience and wisdom has been eye-opening and terrific information for the viewers. We really appreciate all that you've done, not only for this presentation, but what you've done over the years and continue to do to keep us all safe. Thank you very much. Great job. You guys have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.